So there's this one effect. A director used a piece of broken glass and fooled the whole world for 50 years. Not a single person noticed. And what's even crazier, in 1901, a French guy sat in a wheeled cart and made his head grow right in front of the camera until it took up the whole screen. No computer. No post-production. Not a single cut. But that's not the most mind-blowing part. In 1933, there was a movie where an invisible man ran through the snow, and footprints kept appearing one after another, punch after punch into the snow, with nothing in front of the camera. Audiences thought it was real ghosts. And that's still not the craziest thing. In 1964, Disney invented a technology that could pull a perfect key down to every single strand of hair. It kept translucent fabric completely intact. Actors could wear green clothes in front of the camera, and the green wouldn't get removed at all. That technology was better than all of today's AI effects. But in the 1980s, it completely vanished from the face of the earth. Only one part was ever made, and nobody knows where that part is today. So today, I'm going to take down these illusions one by one. Let's start with that piece of broken glass. In 1968, Stanley Kubrick made 2001, A Space Odyssey. This movie is still considered one of the greatest sci-fi films of all time. There's this one shot, a pen floating in a weightless spaceship, slowly rotating, as elegant as if it were really in space. Back then, no computers, no CGI, not even the shadow of a compositing tool. Audiences around the world studied this shot for over 50 years. The main guess was thin wires. But wires would tangle, and not every time the pen rotated. There's no way to hide that. The real answer is so simple you'll feel like someone's messing with you. That pen was stuck to a big piece of clear glass with double-sided tape. The glass was attached to a bearing, and an operator slowly turned it behind the camera. And just like that, the pen floated. A regular piece of glass created a zero-gravity illusion that made millions at the box office and tricked an entire generation of viewers for half a century. But that's just an appetizer. The real jaw-dropper came nearly 70 years before Kubrick. That French guy? His name is Georges Méliès, the first director in the world to systematically study movie special effects. In 1901, he made a short film called The Rubber-Headed Man. In it, his head starts at normal size and then, right in front of the camera, slowly swells up like an inflating balloon until it fills the entire frame. Then shrinks back down. No visible edit points. Your first reaction is probably, oh, they just layered two shots together. But no, everything was shot on the same roll of film in one go. Here's how he did it. First, he shot a scene with a black cloth covering the area where his head would appear. Then he rewound the film, rearranged the set, and only exposed his head against a pure black background. Then he recorded that right on top of the same roll of film. Because dark areas barely register any exposure, the two shots physically blended together perfectly with zero quality loss. That technique alone is crazy enough. But what's even crazier is how he solved the zoom problem. There was no such thing as a zoom lens back then. His solution? He built a ramp on set, sat himself in a wheeled cart, and had his assistant slowly push him toward the camera. The closer he got to the lens, the bigger his head looked on screen. The farther away, the smaller. A beat-up cart and a piece of black cloth, back in 1901, created a visual effect that audiences thought was pure magic. This kind of multiple exposure thinking was later borrowed directly by Kubrick for his space shots in Star 2001 Star. And speaking of that movie's space scenes, here's another trick that went unnoticed for decades. When Kubrick shot the moon and the spaceship together in the same frame, he didn't send the two elements off to be composited. Instead, he first shot the moon alone, leaving half of the frame completely dark. Then he rewound the film, sometimes months later, and recorded the spaceship directly on top of the same roll. The result? No quality loss, no compositing, and the moment it came out of the camera, it was already the final product. The moon and the spaceship looked like they truly existed in the same space. This almost obsessive commitment to getting it all in camera is why 2001, A Space Odyssey still looks flawless over 50 years later. Now, let's roll the clock back to 1927 and look at another genius who played with miniatures. When Fritz Lang was making Metropolis, He needed to show a massive futuristic city. Actors had to walk through these gigantic architectural sets. But the studio wasn't nearly that big, and the budget couldn't come close to building the real thing. His solution? He placed the actors on a platform far away from the camera and had them walk around to make them look smaller. Then he put a mirror at a 45-degree angle, right in front of the camera. That mirror reflected a carefully made miniature city model. By precisely cutting the reflective area of the mirror, the camera saw both the real actors in the distance and the tiny model in the mirror at the same time. The two blended perfectly on screen. That giant futuristic city audiences saw, it was actually a tiny thing sitting next to the camera, and the actors just walking around on a regular platform. This technique was actually taken even further in a movie called Ben-Hur 2 Years Before Metropolis. That film's chariot race scene used tiny sets hanging right in front of the lens. Even the audience seats were filled with tiny mechanical puppets that moved around to simulate a cheering crowd. Filmmakers back then pushed their understanding of the physical world and their own creativity to the absolute limit. All right, now let's talk about those footprints the Invisible Man left in the snow. In the 1933 movie The Invisible Man, the main character drinks a potion and completely disappears from the frame. But when he runs through the snow, footprint after footprint, solid, real, powerful, gets pressed into the ground. Audiences in theaters back then were so freaked out they couldn't make a sound. A lot of people thought there was actually something in the studio. The truth? The ground was covered in fake snow. Underneath that fake snow was a wooden board. Holes were cut into that board ahead of time, exactly in the shape of footprints. Every time a step was supposed to happen, a crew member pulled a mechanism from underboard, a hole opened up, and the snow on top collapsed. A footprint appeared out of thin air. The whole setup was just a piece of wood with holes in it, and yet it created a terrifying effect that still gives people chills 90 years later. What does this tell you? Effects have never been a technology problem. They're an imagination problem. Finally, let's talk about the lost technology, the one that's the most heartbreaking. In 1964, Disney used something called the sodium vapor process in the movie Mary Poppins. Today's green screens have one major problem that nobody's been able to truly solve for decades: edge handling. Hair, translucent fabric, semi-transparent objects. Put them in front of a green screen, and the edges are always fuzzy, always contaminated. That's because the camera can't precisely tell the difference between the edge of the actor and the transition area into the green background. But sodium vapor light emits only one incredibly pure wavelength, 589 nanometers. That wavelength barely exists in nature or in any man-made light source. Inside the camera, there was a special beam-splitting prism coated specifically for that wavelength. It could separate the sodium light onto a separate black and white film strip, creating a perfect silhouette matte. And that matte wasn't just black and white. Semi-transparent areas showed up as gray, which meant fine details like hair and sheer fabric could keep their perfect transparency. Meanwhile, the color film strip didn't even register the sodium light at all. There was almost no stray light contaminating the background. The edges were so clean you wouldn't believe it. Actors could wear green clothes in front of camera, and the green wouldn't accidentally get removed. Sheer fabric stayed completely intact. That effect, judged by today's standards, is still top tier. Even better than most modern digital effects. But here's the problem. That beam-splitting prism was insanely difficult to manufacture. Only a handful were ever made in the entire world. Only a few cameras used it. By the 1980s, the film industry started shrinking, digital technology was rising, and this technique was completely abandoned. Those few prisms scatter across the globe, and nobody knows where they are today. No one has ever gone looking to bring it back.